Like, it's okay for you to build a life that's different than the one that you had growing up or that you have seen around you. And there's so much potential. It just really starts with doing the scary thing.
Mompreneurs, welcome back for another episode of the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast. I am so grateful you're here. Thank you for spending time with me on this episode, and you're not going to regret it because today's guest is Laura Sinclair. She is a fellow mompreneur podcaster and marketing expert. And I really find that my conversations with other mompreneur podcasters are just some of the juiciest conversations that I personally could even listen to over and over again because I don't know, you get two mom business owners together and man, they're just like bees in a hive. You know, we just connect and we so understand where each other are coming from. And I just feel so grateful and proud that I am in a community of podcasters like Laura Sinclair and the other podcasters who have been on my podcast. I am just so grateful. It's so good. So what are some of the conversations that we have during this podcast? Why should you stay tuned to the very end? We talk about embracing your authenticity in your entrepreneurial journey. We talk about asking yourself, what kind of mom do you want to be? Not what kind of mom does society expect you to be, not what you were taught, what do your parents expect, whatever. You know, really coming home to yourself on the topic of being a mom and a business owner. And that really leads to a lot of authenticity and ultimately more happiness in your business, in your life. So we talk about breaking free from hiding behind your business and stepping into the spotlight. And I know that can be so hard, especially when you have an online business. We talk about making decisions with clarity and less emotional overwhelm, which can definitely be hard for us mom business owners. And then to navigating the complexities of being a mom and business owner and finding harmony and, you know, the focusing on the personal growth that we really need to focus on to grow as an individual and also grow in our businesses. So before I share that interview with Laura, I want to invite you to leave a review for the podcast. It helps us know that we're creating content that resonates with you, and it also helps other mompreneurs find the podcast. And then 2, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss another interview. You'll get a little notification every time an interview goes live. And then 2, if you know anybody who would love to hear this podcast episode, please share the episode. It means so much. So without further ado, here is my interview with fellow mom podcaster, Laura Sinclair, and she's also a phenomenal marketing expert. And if you're not following her, definitely do that. All of her contact information is in the show notes below. So without further ado, here's my conversation with the host of This Mother Means Business, Laura Sinclair. Hi, Laura. Welcome to the podcast. I am so happy to have you on the podcast. I am a fan of your podcast. It's This Mother Means Business. I love it. It's so authentic. It's so real. But you do much more than the podcast. So why don't you give listeners a little introduction on what you're doing now?
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. And oh gosh, anytime anyone tells me they listen to my podcast, I still like immediately blush. So I don't know if this stops. So far, other podcasters have told me that like that doesn't stop, but I'm so honored that you were listening. My name is Laura Sinclair. If we haven't met, if you're listening to this and we haven't met yet, I am a mother. I'm the host of This Mother Means Business podcast. I own a social media marketing agency called the LJ Social Agency, and I am a business and marketing mentor for ambitious mothers. I help them build their businesses without sacrificing their sanity.
Your podcast, your your content is so authentic. It's so like when I'm feeling like out of alignment, I have to tell you, I can look at your content and go, that's where I'm supposed to be. Like it just
Mm,
feels like direct and honest. You're not pretending to be anything. You really get to the heart of the unique experience of what it's like to be a mom and an entrepreneur, which, I don't think we can talk about too much because, we need to support each other.
yeah. Thank you
It's
for saying that. Thank you for saying that. That's really
yes.
what I aim to do. I mean, I've got two little kids. So I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I've been an entrepreneur. This is year 10 of being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was an entrepreneur before I had kids. And then, I thought that was really hard. And then I had kids and it was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh man, this is so much harder than it was before. And there just weren't, I found going into motherhood, a lot of the conversations and a lot of the people around me, I'm the only entrepreneur in my family, but a lot of the people that were around me, it was like, it's so beautiful. Like, congratulations. It's going to be so great. And
Yeah.
I kind of had the opposite experience. And I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to navigate this duality. And not because I didn't love my baby, but because it was just so much. And anybody that
Yeah.
has a baby, I mean, if you're listening to this, you have kids, but
Right.
it's so much that first year. Plus,
Mhm.
you also have a business to run and all these other conflicting priorities. And I think, I've had a lot of conversations with entrepreneurial mothers sort of offline, like in masterminds
Mhm.
and rooms between friends that I've, been able to meet since becoming an entrepreneur, that I was just like, you know what? Like we need to talk about this more. We need to just
Yeah.
have this conversation more. And I think I'm a person who for a really long time struggled to figure out where I fit.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's so fun for me now and also really interesting to be able to connect with people who say things like, I really relate to you.
Mhm.
I needed to hear what you said, which is somebody who's, struggled for a long time to figure out where I fit. I think being just truthful about my experience has
Mhm.
connected me to so many other people,
Mhm.
whether it's just through listening to the podcast or coming into my coaching or in my agency environment, that it really just has been magical. Like I couldn't imagine being anybody else than the person that I am in terms
Mhm.
of having those real conversations, because I think me missing them, not having those conversations in my first year of motherhood were so detrimental to me. And so I'm just so passionate about making sure that this conversation is heard, because
Yeah.
I know how much it would have helped me. And so because of that, I know it will help other people. And
Yeah.
so I will forever be on this path.
Yeah. And we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but just you saying that reminds me of a podcast episode that you did where you talked about finding yourself
Mm-hmm.
and getting that authenticity back. It's kind of like off the rails, but can you just talk about how that happened for you? And
Yeah.
because I think being a mom is so lonely at times, and being an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, especially an online entrepreneur, can be very lonely.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was such an important conversation that that share to be so vulnerable. It was so
Mhm.
important. And it's why I started this podcast.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, I'd love to share. I think, I very much, as many of us do, lose ourselves in
Yeah.
motherhood, right? I had this really strong and firm identity of who I was, at least I
Hmm.
thought who I was going into motherhood. A lot of my identity was really anchored in the work that I did. And so,
Yes.
I worked for a German automotive company that was sort of my last corporate job. And on the outside, that, when I told people that's what I did, I led all the digital marketing for this luxury German automotive company in Canada.
Mhm.
People were like, oh, you're important. You matter, like, oh, you've got the big job. And then, I left corporate. I owned a gym for 5 years. And for a long time, I would say to people, people say, well, what do you do? And I say, oh, well, I own a CrossFit gym, but I used to work at this luxury
Mhm.
German automotive company and have this really important job. It was like my whole identity was wrapped up into what I did. And
Mhm.
so when I became a mother, it was like, whoa, I don't even know anymore. Like my sense of self was totally confused, because it was like, well, no, now I'm no longer this independent being. I have this little tiny human that my whole
Mm.
life has just shifted. I can't even really, I'm so far away from being able to be super active and present in my career. My priorities are all over the place. And then I just got lost in it, right? I got lost in trying to keep my business open, got lost in trying to figure out how to be the best mother possible. That somewhere along the way, I just like genuinely didn't even know what I liked to do, what I liked to wear, what I enjoyed, what I thought was funny, what music I liked to listen to. Like I just lost all of it. And, I really hit a point where it was just like I was paralyzed by my own lack of knowing and was feeling so, we talk about alignment a lot in the online space and feeling so out of alignment that everything was hard and nothing was fun. And so it started with me just exploring with like literally my hair. My hair's straight today, but I have curly hair. And so I was like, okay, like what if I like wore my hair curly? What would that be like? And then it was like, what do I like to wear? Like I didn't even know, I owned a gym. So I spent 5 years wearing Lululemons. And then when the gym closed in 2020 and I had this, building up my online business, and this was sort of the season of me trying to figure out like, who the heck am I? As my kids started to become like a little less dependent on me, have a little bit more space. And so I started with like even clothes. Like I used to love vintage t-shirts. I'm wearing an AC/DC t-shirt right now. And it was just like started with little things. Like, what do I think is fun? And like, what music did I used to like to listen to? And so it really has been this coming home to myself. And I won't say I can't be like, I'm here, it has been this process. Right now I'm in the season of like wanting to have more hobbies that aren't just working out and working on my business. But I think that that's the journey. And I think for me, like really coming home to who I am. Also, I recognizing that like who I am is enough outside of like removing some of those external things. Like I don't really identify, like, I started this podcast by telling you what it is that I do, but I'm so much more than that. Like that's not my value. My value isn't in the fact that I help people make money on the internet. Right? My value is so much more than that. It's the relationships that I have with other people. It's the impact that I want to create in the world. It has nothing to do with my title. And so for me, being able to like really reconnect with who I am and also find confidence in that process, that has been the thing that really allows me, honestly, to show up on the internet and show up on my podcast in my fullest expression of myself and bring my full belonging to those environments. And fortunately, it's a belonging that a lot of people are drawn to that allows me to make impact. And whether that's like a financial impact or even just for somebody to listen to my podcast and be like, that was the thing that I needed to hear.
And that is once you figure out how to do it and do it consistently in an online world where we're constantly bombarded with messages and images and expectations that may or may not be true, or it's so tough to do that. So, I mean, it's so refreshing. And I think it's a lesson to anybody who may be struggling, that if you're not finding that you're getting a following or things aren't feeling right, work on finding yourself more. And then I think that just being you is totally enough.
Totally. When I first started my online business, I mean, you have to remember, I have a corporate background. So like very corporate background. And then I owned a gym. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to, when I started my business, my focus was teaching small business owners how to use social media marketing because that's what I knew. And I had a 3-month-old baby at home. So we were doing what was easy. Yeah. My business is I know I still do some of that work. The work that I do primarily has really shifted away from some of that, but it's still, that's still in my zone of genius. It's still in my wheelhouse. But I would show up on social media in this like very polished, and I am wearing a blazer right now. So we're not going to critique blazers because we do like them over the right t-shirt, but very polished, very professional, like the way that I thought that I was supposed to show up as a marketing expert. Right. And when I finally let go of all of that stuff, I started deciding I was going to wear my hair curly, right? Well, curly hair takes forever to dry. It just does, right? If you're going to air dry, I don't have time to diffuse my hair. So my hair is like wet. If I wash my hair in the morning and I'm trying to let my curly hair do its thing, it's wet until like 2 p.m. Right? I've got a lot of hair. I've got a lot of hair. So I just started showing up in my stories with wet hair because it was like, yep, my hair's wet. Like I don't have time for this. Or there was a day that I had pink eye. And so I found a filter on my stories that had glasses so that nobody would see my pink eye. Like I made a joke of it. Right. And it was just like, well, I got to show up my stories. I think I was launching something at the time. I was like, well, we're here with, the pink eye glasses and like, nobody wants to see my pink eye. And so once I, really shifted away from this sense of like, well, this is how I think I'm supposed to be, and just started being like, no, actually, this is who I am. Yeah. That's when everything changed for my business. People messaged me and say like, hey, I just found you. I want to be your best friend. How do I work with you? And I'm like, cool. Like, let's be best friends. I am down to be best friends. Like if you're, accepting who I am and my full authentic version of myself on the internet and you want to be my friend, like, let's be friends. And so it has changed everything, right? Is that willingness to just be who I am and know that it's not for everybody. And that's okay. Right. Like if I'm not for you, chances are you're not for me either. So that's okay. Right. The people that it is for, that's perfect.
Yeah. And we don't realize how much we're conditioned, especially as women and moms, to want to please everybody.
Yep.
And no, we have to get out of that business. And it's just, it's not sustainable. You're not going to please anybody. And, the people who don't like you are probably just not going to like you anyway. So what?
Yeah. And honestly, I think it is it's a women thing for sure. It's extra a mom thing to be almost like mothering in the way that we run our business. And one of the things I try to talk to my clients about is this idea between like being nice versus being good. And I think we're often so worried about being nice. Oh, if I'm just like, oh, I'm going to lower my price because I just don't want to, I know they're having a hard time right now. Or like, I'm taking on this project, even though I don't really want to, because my kid actually has this game and now I want to be there, but I got to be at my business because I don't want to let this client down, right? This constant story of wanting to be nice, but in being nice, actually, what we're doing most of the time is hurting ourselves. We're martyring ourselves in some capacity. And I love telling the story, and this client doesn't mind that I tell the story. We're going to tell it anyway. She, she came to me at the beginning of the year and was like, I'm really feeling burnt out in my business. I don't know if I can do this anymore. And I said, okay, let's look at all your clients. I love information. Yes, I'm a feeler, but I also love information. I said, like, let's look at your clients. Like, so we pull up this one client, the client that she's doing the most work with. I said, okay, I want you to look at everything that you did for this client last year, top to bottom, everything. I want you to list it all out. And I need you to tell me how much it would cost for you to do those things. And so she came back and the number was like $40,000, which was a big number. And then when we looked at what the client actually paid her, it was like $1,800, like a massive difference, which is not okay. Yeah. But also, she was like, I'm just trying to overserve and help my client and do this thing. And I was like, you didn't even get paid half of what that work was worth, right? Because we were trying to do the nice thing and try to be nice, right? But at the same time, now this woman, this client of mine is in a position where she's feeling so burnt out in her business, feeling like she's working so hard and not seeing anything in return. It's because she's just literally bending herself in knots to please people that aren't even paying her half of what her worth is. And so for me, it's really this shift between being nice and good. And being a good person, I care so much more about I want you to think I'm a good person. I am a good person. I actually don't really care if you think that I'm nice or not in the context of my business, right? I'm a nice person. We meet on the street. I'll be nice to you. But in the context of my business, it doesn't really matter to me whether you think that I'm nice, because a good person can say no. I can be a really good person and say no. I can be a good person and charge my value. I'm a good person and I can hold a boundary. I can protect my family. I can protect myself. And that might not always be the thing that feels nice to somebody, right? Like that might mean me saying no to you. And people don't always like to be said no to. But, this client that I'm, referencing, we started shifting to being a good person. And she's going to more than double, thankfully, her, I think she's already surpassed her entire 2022 income by, I think, May of 2023. And she'll probably end up tripling, if not quadrupling, what she made last year, this year, because she's saying no. She's obviously charging for what she should be. We're not bending ourselves over in knots, but I see that I use this example because it's an extreme one, but I see it over and over again, right? It's in little ways, the little ways that we say yes to things that we should say no to, or we bend a boundary when we should be saying no, because we desire to be nice. I think that is honestly one of the things that's allowed me to be successful, is because I do say no, do hold
Mm-hmm.
boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
That's kept me in entrepreneurship for almost 10 years, especially as a mother, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
my business will never come before my kids, ever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means disappointing people, but I'm
Right.
never going to disappoint them, and I'm not going to disappoint myself. And I think that is actually a rare thing to, or I've discovered is a rare
Yeah.
thing for mothers.
It's a codependency.
Yeah.
And it's a full circle thing. It's not only you're codependent or feel like responsible for somebody else's emotions or outcomes. It's like whether you're a mentor or coach or whatever you do, you simply just can't have all of the answers.
Right.
You just have to hold space for somebody. It's, you know, you just can't continually have this burden of like, it's all on me.
Right.
It is. And it's just like this full circle of like what you talked about with, you know, finding yourself. You know, it's like we get addicted to this external validation. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's ultimately because we're not validating ourselves. We
Right.
don't, you know, it's just this whole cycle that you have to break because I mean, I'm starting to build a team, and I talked to somebody and they were kind of like, told me their price, and I was like, okay. And she goes, I know it's a lot. And I was like, what? Don't say
Like
that.
I didn't say anything about how much
I
it was. I
said,
said, okay.
it's perfect for me. Yeah. She was like,
Yeah.
really? I said, yeah, you're valuable. You're great.
Mm-hmm.
You
It's
know, so
crazy.
we do it even with other women. It's like, oh my gosh, it breaks my heart.
Yeah, it does. It breaks
But
my heart too. And it's so important. Right.
it
And,
is.
I talk to my clients a lot. I don't know how much you know about Myers-Briggs, but I'm an
Mhm.
INTJ.
Oh, okay.
So I am an introvert, which a lot of people actually find surprising, but I am an introvert.
Yeah.
But where I have a T, a lot of my clients have an F. And so the F is feeling.
Yeah.
Whereas T is, I don't know if it's technical, but it is like, I like information. And so
Hmm.
where I help a lot of Fs is to be like, let's just back that for a second. It doesn't mean that I'm not
Hmm.
a feeling person. Like I am very much a
Oh,
feeling
yeah.
person. But when it comes to
Hmm.
business, when it comes to making decisions, I live in that T. And so
Hmm.
oftentimes my client will say, well, what should I do? And I'll say, well, I'll tell you what I would do. It's not going to be what you would do, but let's see if
Hmm.
we can meet in the middle, because
Right.
I have become over time pretty good at removing, and I'm not going to say like I'm the best. I'm pretty
Yeah.
good at removing feeling from business decisions. And
Hmm.
doesn't mean it's not hard. Doesn't mean I don't cry. Like I absolutely cry. We all cry.
Yeah.
But when it's like, no, like, okay, so let's use the extreme example I was just using, for that client to has to go now to her client and not say like, hey, I need to recoup these costs, because that's what's done. But it's like,
Hmm.
hey, moving forward, like I need to paint this picture for you. Like I
Hmm.
need to show you, like I know we're talking about, the new year and
Hmm.
moving forward. Like if you want me to do all of these things, this is what it's going to look like. And it's like, but how do I do that? She's going to be upset with me. She's not going to pay that. I'm going to lose this client. And it's like, well, I mean, maybe you should lose this client, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe that's actually like, if we look at the data, not a bad thing. And
Hmm.
so I think a lot of the work that I end up doing, and this wasn't, when I mentioned before that a lot of the work that I started doing was this like social media focused work. And
Hmm.
now a lot of the work that I end up doing is a lot more confidence work. The thing that
Hmm.
my clients will say to me most is like, yeah, I help them make more money. Yes, we hire, we grow systems, like we do all of that. But the thing that I get the most excited about is when my clients say one of three things. It's either like, you saw me, thank you for seeing
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
You get me,
Hmm.
and I feel so much more confident now.
Hmm.
And a lot of the time, honestly, in business, that confidence comes from being able to strip away the feeling, the emotion from some of these
Yeah.
decisions. And if you're a
Hmm.
person that has an F in your Myers-Briggs, I don't. So
Yeah.
I'm great at that, right? Because it's like, well, no, like I get that you have these feelings, and it's not that they're not valid. They are.
Yeah.
But let's pull
Hmm.
data into this. And
Hmm.
because my brain leads with the T, I lead with the
Hmm.
thinking. When I show a feeling person the information, they're like, oh, yep, you're right. And so I think that's a big part of it too, right? When we talk about like people pleasers and our tendency as mothers is sometimes we just need to take a step back and like really look at the facts. And it's something that, I'm grateful that it's just innate to me. But it does allow me to be a source of support for a lot of people that's not innate for, because that is protection. That is, you make decisions with information rather than making decisions with, depth of feeling and from a place of emotion and sometimes an irrational place. And I say that lovingly.
Yeah, no. And I think as mompreneurs, one of the things, or women entrepreneurs, I know it's probably a stereotype and I don't mean to perpetuate it, but emotional control can be kind of a sticking point. You have to, we're just more emotional beings. I think we have a tendency to feel things on a deeper level, I mean, so to have somebody that you can kind of connect with and can give you that insight just really sounds really invaluable. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I feel very lucky to do the work that I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, your feelings are not at all unwarranted, or, validate them, feel them, but they don't always have to be in the driver's seat for sure.
Exactly.
And I loved your episode on the numbers.
Oh yeah.
I love that. Yes, and because, that's the tea too, I mean, get in love with your numbers and that can help you make better decisions too. But I know my listeners love to hear how people got into business, because we often just see somebody in their glory and don't see all of the tough things that you went through. And I think it's important to share your story of like having a business and then a child, and going through that. So can you just share with us what that was like and how you started a business? And
yeah. So I mentioned earlier in the episode that I'm the first entrepreneur in my family, which is mostly true. My mother's father was an engineer and he owned a law firm, but he died when I was a baby. So I don't have any living examples of entrepreneurship in my family. And so when I say that, I always like to add that caveat too. But for me, being an entrepreneur meant like you needed venture capital, you needed hundreds of $1 million, you needed backers. Like this wasn't like, you couldn't just like start a business. That wasn't a thing. Largely because I grew up around, like everybody in my family, for the most part, had like white collar jobs, right? Doctors, lawyers, accountants, bankers. That was, business people. That was the world that I grew up in. And so I had very little exposure to small business. It wasn't something that I knew. I didn't know it was an option. So I had a corporate career. I was in corporate for almost 10 years. I was very uncomfortable the entire time. Like the whole time, I think the longest I ever stayed at a job was maybe 2.5 years. Like I was always jumping, like, what's next? This is boring. I don't like this, constantly questioning everything. Looking back, I was a terrible employee. So apologies to my employers. I was just never meant to be there. It wasn't where I was supposed to be. But that's all jokes aside. I do have great relationships with some of my former bosses. But in 2015, I met my now husband. And he owned a CrossFit gym. The CrossFit community in Ontario, Canada is relatively small. And we were sort of, we were living together. I think at that point we were looking to move into a different community. And the owners of the CrossFit gym had actually that CrossFit gym in that community had gone to my husband's brother, who they owned the gym together. I'm getting convoluted with the story here, but we were presented essentially with the opportunity to purchase a CrossFit gym. And my husband initially, who was my fiance at the time, was like, no. And I'm like, but yes, let's do it. Like I have this vivid memory actually of coming home to my boyfriend at the time. This was years before, saying, my job and, how's work? And I was like, I was fine, but like, I just want to like quit my job and run a gym. Like, that sounds like that would be way more fun. And I think I just said it in passing because I loved going to the gym. I've been an athlete my whole life. And I was just like, this would be way better than what I'm doing now. Even though on paper, what I'm doing now is like the sexy job that everybody thinks I'm important and I matter. And so fast forward a couple of years, I'm no longer with that boyfriend. I'm with my now fiance. And we had the opportunity to buy a gym and my fiance was like, no, I don't want to do that. And I was like, but I do. And so I can be very convincing when I want to be. And he got on board and we ran the gym for 5 years. And during that time I started, my background's in corporate marketing. And so was able very quickly. We bought this it was a failing CrossFit gym, if we're going to label it. I think I paid 30 grand for this business, which in the grand scheme of business, I think I bought the equipment, and I think we maybe inherited like 60 members. Most of them were disgruntled because the old ownership was running this thing into the ground. And so between my husband's knowledge of being able to run a CrossFit gym and my marketing ability, we were able to turn this thing around relatively quickly. And we ran that for 5 years, but we'd owned the gym for 1 year before my daughter was born. Mm-hmm. So we got married June 4th and went on our honeymoon and took ownership of the gym July 1st.
Wow.
So and then my daughter was born June 19th of the following year. So we just decided to just do it all.
Yeah.
Why not? And so really at that point, I hadn't even really figured out entrepreneurship at that point. Yes, the business was turning around, but there was still so much I was learning. That first year of being an entrepreneur is wild, regardless of what it is that you're doing. Mm-hmm. You make so many mistakes. You goof up so many times. You're just starting to get used to falling on your face, right? That first year, you're just constantly falling on your face because you're doing new things all the time. I'm still falling on my face, if I'm being honest, a lot. But that's how you learn, right? That's how you learn. That's how you grow. And so then my daughter was born and I had this really difficult time adjusting to, I just built my business for the year. I had all this freedom. It all made sense. And then my daughter was born and it was okay, now what? And at that point we did have a team. We were really fortunate in that we were able to, we had one staff member in particular, his name was Adam, and he coached a lot of the classes. So, I had some time to figure it out. And then at about 7 months, my daughter was about 7 months old and Adam tells us he's leaving. I was no. What do you mean you're leaving? My husband's a firefighter. And so he had his job as well. So he couldn't very well run the gym and be a firefighter at the same time. It doesn't really work. So I tried to get him to do that. Didn't really work out. So Adam left. We ended up having to hire a nanny. And that was really this first shift into me redefining motherhood for myself. Because the versions of motherhood that I had grown up with, where my mom was a stay-at-home mom, a lot of the other moms that I was around, very few of them work. I could only really think of a handful that actually worked, let alone that were entrepreneurs. Otherwise, they were stay-at-home moms and had a bajillion children, and that's just what they did. And so for me, I really had to redefine motherhood for myself and what good mothering was, because the versions of good mothering that I had witnessed were these versions where you stayed at home and you just sacrificed yourself for your kid, and that's all you did. And so that first year of motherhood for me, was really uncomfortable because that's not what I wanted. And I knew that very quickly. It's my daughter was born and I had this business and I was but I just want to go be at the gym. And I want to instead I'm at home in my diaper and, I'm breastfeeding this child and I'm figuring all this stuff for the first time. My hormones are all over the place. And so when we hired the nanny at 7 months, this was this first realization that okay, the version of motherhood that I've been trying to fit myself into for 7 months that's making me miserable is actually not going to be the thing. And so I had so much guilt about hiring this nanny, but she ended up being the best thing that could have happened to my family and myself and my daughter. She was with us for 3.5 years and loved my daughter, and allowing somebody else to love my daughter and for me to go and do some things for myself really started to redefine what good motherhood even means. And was really the beginning of, my daughter turned 6 a couple weeks ago, and this is really the beginning of unraveling all of this.
I hear that story over and over again where, you not only have to come to terms with who you are, but what kind of mom do you want to be? And if you don't figure that out, I had a guest who shared this story where she was running herself into the ground and just looked at her daughter and said, if I was being a good mom, what would I be doing? And it was the complete opposite of what she was doing. And it totally revolutionized her life and her business and turned things around. So I think that story is so important to share because we just go through it quietly. And we just don't think anybody understands or anybody else is going through it. So I think that is just, it's really critical. Mompreneurs, are you wanting more abundance and bliss in your business? Are you wanting to learn how you can juggle it all with more energy, happiness, impact, and earning more? Well, you're not going to want to miss my new masterclass, 7 Strategies for More Abundance and Bliss as a Mompreneur. I'm taking lessons I've learned from almost a decade as a mompreneur myself, having spent thousands on coaches and courses, and also interviewing dozens of mompreneurs and experts on the podcast and growing it to be one of the top mom business podcasts. So how did I do it? I'm going to share my strategies with you in my new free live masterclass, and I would love it if you would join me, and you can learn how you can register and more information at mombusinesscoach.com/learn. Now back to my conversation with the lovely Laura Sinclair. So at some point you transitioned from the brick and mortar business to an online business, which is a whole other ball of wax. It helps it. I almost think you are really forced to do like soul searching when you have an online business in a way that's different than brick and mortar. So can you talk about what that transition was like and some of the challenges that you kind of faced and you see with online business?
Yeah. So I'm going to use the word lucky, because I do think when we talk about success, there's luck involved. And so in February of 2020, I was running a really successful postnatal fitness program at my gym. And so it was bringing in like quite a bit more revenue. It was like this additional program on top of the things that were going on. And so I actually had signed up for a course by a woman. Her name's Jessica DeRose. She runs a course called Empower University. And so in February of 2022, I committed to joining Empower for my fitness business. I was like, it's going to be an extension of the gym. It's going to be great. This is pre-COVID. I think I was like 3 weeks pregnant, 4 weeks pregnant at the time. And I was like, you know what? The gym's running great. I'm going to start this online thing and like, everything's gonna be wonderful. Well, in March 2020, we all know what happened, but I was in this course. I was taking this course. And so it was interesting. I learned so much in that course, but the thing that stuck out for me actually is that I think it was $5,000 at the time. And there were 50 of us in the course. And I remember sitting there being like, I'm not great at math, but that math I can do. I can do 50 times 5. And I remember sitting there, and that's a lot. That is more money than my gym makes. And at that point in an entire year. And I was like, and this girl who I don't even know, I just found her on Instagram, who is lovely, by the way. I've met her in person. Just made that for a 12-week program. And I remember thinking, what in the ever loving bleep is going on here? Like, this is insane. And so there were elements of, so many things that I learned, but there were so many things that I was like, I know that. And I'm sitting here being like, this is crazy. So this is February 2020. March 2020 happens. The gym's closed. I'm able to dive into this course. The end of, our gym takes a massive hit during COVID. We were closed for so long, lost like 60% of our membership. People didn't come back because they were afraid. And it was just my husband and I. We didn't have backers. It was like, this is our livelihood. And so we made the decision at the end of 2020 to close the gym. And I had been kind of like I was still doing some online fitness stuff, but had really fallen out of love with it. I would pregnant, run a class from my garage over Zoom, turn the Zoom off at the end of the class and throw up on the floor. Like, it wasn't fun. It was just it was like such hard work to try to keep this going. It really killed my love of helping people in fitness. And so I'd been sitting on this idea of like, starting this social media coaching thing, because it's what I knew. I had a 3-month-old baby at the time. So, helping people how to use social media, that was easy. I was like, okay, we got to make some money. Let's figure this out. And so I think for me, when you talk about the biggest shifts, and to your point, needing to do a lot of personal work, when I look back at my time at the gym, from a marketing perspective, the thing that I regret the most is actually not leaning into myself more. I really hid behind my business. And so it was like, the gym was called CrossFit Bradford, and everything was like, come to CrossFit Bradford. It was never like, this is Laura. People would come into the gym terrified, right? People, you walk into a CrossFit gym for the first time, you're scared. right? If you've never been to a CrossFit gym before, you're assuming you're walking into this like deep, dark dungeon
Yes.
with a bunch of muscular dudes with tattoos, with their shirts off, who are throwing 300 pounds over their head and like,
Right.
why am I here? And then people would come in and then they'd see me.
Uh-huh.
And I was bubbly and I'm an introvert, but I can do the extroverted thing. I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh my gosh, this isn't what I expected it to be at all. And so I know that if I had shown up on social media a little more, put my face out there a little more, been who I am, which I wasn't ready for at the time. So I don't hate myself for it at all. It just is what it is. That's the lesson. I think for me, shifting into the online space of having to be myself, I didn't have a gym to hide behind anymore. It was like, you are now selling you, kid.
Yeah.
So figure it out. That for me was the biggest adjustment. I think, having come from a corporate background, worked in an agency environments, I understand client service. I understood, running a gym is sort of like a microcosm of a lot of things in business. You're dealing with insurance, you're dealing with staff, you're dealing with retail, running service, scheduling, employees, like so many marketing, sales, like so many of it. I've been in over 1,000 sales environments from owning a gym. There's like literally nothing I haven't heard or seen in a sales environment, which is incredible. But I think for me, like I had all the tools. It was just for me getting over this hurdle of being myself. And, to my earlier point, I showed up the way that I like thought I was supposed to, but like, it was undoing all of that and being okay with being like, no, I'm Laura Sinclair. This is who I am. This is what I do. Yeah. Rather than like, hey, CrossFit Bradford, this is the gym. And so that for me was a really big shift. And, I always say entrepreneurship is the greatest personal development journey you're ever going to go on. Motherhood and entrepreneurship together it's a wild ride. And so for me, there was, the big shift, obviously leaning into myself, but also recognizing that I didn't want to do things the way that I did them the first year. So that first year owning the gym with my daughter was really difficult on myself. It was difficult on my husband. It was difficult on our marriage for a lot of different reasons. And so I had a different perspective about it as well. And like, I started my business working 3 days a week. I slept I worked when my kid napped, or like I would create content. Reels weren't really a thing back then. So we didn't have to do as much video content, but I would create content like nursing my son or I do engagement while I'm nursing my son. Like I'm sitting there for half an hour, I might as well do something. And so, for me, it was like in the nooks and crannies of, raising my second child and being at home during, what was still restricted at that point. I mean, he was born October 2020. Went all in on my online business in January of 2021. And I think the big shift for sure has just been that piece of, I don't have anywhere to be. You can create anything at any time, but really just leaning into who it is that I am and being comfortable with allowing myself to be fully seen, which I was very easy to do, to hide away from, both in corporate and in my gym.
And I talk to a lot of moms who want to start a business and they are kind of afraid of the online business. And I think the element of having to be the front face of their business is scary.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of having an online business? I mean,
so many.
I know. And it's like, I talk to people who, I have a toddler and I want to create this where I've got to be this and this and this. And I'm like, are you really thinking about this?
Yeah. It's, it's sure? It's wild. There's so many benefits to it because like, okay, I'll use today. Today I've spoken to you. You live in the US. I'm in Canada. I've also talked to someone that lives in Singapore and someone that lives in Zurich today. So, in terms of like scalability and what is possible, it is enormous, right? Yeah. With my brick and mortar gym, we were in a small community called in Bradford, Ontario, which is a relatively small community. My ability to create impact is so much smaller, right? I have literally clients all over the world, which is so cool to be able to say, right? I have a lot of Canadian clients, which is fun too, because I love a good Canadian.
I was in Canada this summer. I love Canada.
I'm very grateful to live here and to be Canadian. But I think, and the you can create whatever you want on the internet. I think one of the highest grossing courses in 2020, and that was actually Jessica Rose that shared the stat, was somebody that was creating a course on Kajabi to teach people how to teach their cats to use the toilet. Yeah. And I remember thinking, like, if somebody could make just an absolute whack ton of money teaching cats to use a toilet, like anything is possible on the internet, right? You get to control your schedule. You get to control what you create, how you create it, when you create it.
Yeah.
There's also a downside to running an online business. A lot of people in your regular world won't understand it. They'll think you're crazy. You know, you may even lose friends over it. Nobody cares at first, right? There's a lot there. There's also the stories that'll start to come up.
They don't think you're working. They think you can pick up and do. I run into that a lot. And I'm like,
yeah. Yeah. My favorite is when people ask me how my Instagram business is going. You know, like, it's great. Would you like to receive the receipts? If you saw the receipts, you would not refer to it as that, but that is fine.
Instagram business.
How's your Instagram business? And I'm like, it's fine. But it's true, right? Like, you're choosing something that people don't normally choose. And so there's that side of it. But the other side of it is like being able to create boundaries for yourself, knowing when to turn it off. And this is something admittedly that I struggle with, right? Like, I could spend my whole day in my DMs. Is that how I want to spend my time? Absolutely not. Right. Like, it's allowing yourself to disconnect, allowing yourself to set some boundaries. And also, like, creating space. I think I'm in this season right now of wanting connection and going to events in person. I mean, they're back, right? I mean, we're out of that 2020, 2021 year where it's like trying to create connection with people in different and more meaningful ways. It's really easy to become like insular and like stay in your house, which was really the first year of me building my business. I didn't go anywhere for 2021. Beginning of 2022, I finally did. But recognizing that, like, you can also just become like an island, which has its downsides very much so as well. So I think there's upsides, downsides to both. But I think the challenge with an online business is there's so much potential, but there's also so much information, and there's so much that can make you feel like it should be easy. It's not easy. You still need business fundamentals.
Right.
I used to market my business talking about how I made, 6 figures in the first 9 months of my online business. That was something that I would use to market my services. Because I don't use it anymore. And the reason I don't use it is, well, there's a couple of things. One is I don't think somebody should hire me just on how much money I make. They should hire me because how much money my clients make. And so I talk about that now. I don't talk about myself. But also I just don't think that that's not true. Like, it's true if you look at my bank account, but I also had 6 years of entrepreneurship. I also had 8 years of corporate marketing. Like, I wasn't my first day, I wasn't like picking up my phone for the, I wasn't like picking up my phone for the first time being like, what is this Instagram thing? And then I made 100 grand in 9 months. Like, no, it's not it at all. And so, there's that piece of it too. I think there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of, can be a lot of confusion for sure.
No, I appreciate all those comments, because we're back to the conditioning. If you only know a brick and mortar, the online world can seem so mysterious. And for other people who have somehow gotten some secret memo, or,
there are people that are good at it though. They're like, me, like, I've been in marketing. I'm going to toot my own horn here for a second. toot, Laura. Like, I know my shit. Okay? But there are even times where I'll be like, what does she know that I don't? What am I missing? Right. And then I have to catch myself. Like, no, you're good. Like, you've got this. And now there's so many different. There's lots of things I don't know. Let's just be honest. But when it comes to like building an online business, growing on social media, getting clients, sales, like, I know it. I got it, but it is easy to get caught in this trap of like, well, what, whoa, what is this shiny object? Right. And like,
oh yes, there are lots of shiny objects out there.
Fortunately, I don't buy the shiny objects, but I in my mind, I'm like, oh, what am I missing? And then you're like, oh, nothing, because businesses actually take time, and there is no one, magic bullet that's going to solve all your business problems.
Right. Well, you have this incredible marketing background. You have so many things to share. What are some of the things we talked about, being authentic? Maybe you could speak to that. How can we market our businesses better? And by being better is being more authentic. How can we move more to that place?
I think and it's so interesting because I just had this conversation with a client yesterday. It is really about leaning into who you are and telling your story, because most of us work in industries where especially if we do something that helps another person, there's actually like a vulnerability piece for asking for help, whether it's like help with fitness, help with your business, help with podcast, help with whatever, right? You're having somebody coming to you and being like, hey, I need help.
Yeah.
And when we eliminate our humanness from a story, from the way that we show up, the way that we market our business, it makes it really uncomfortable for a person to ask you for help. Like if all I did was talk about how awesome my life is, which it's not awesome because like, let's be honest, there's a lot that's great. But there's a lot that's not. But if all I did was talking about the positive stuff that happens to me, I would be so unapproachable. Right.
Well,
but
yeah.
because I talk about the things that are hard, because I talk about the stuff that's happened to me that wasn't very fun, people are like, oh, there's comfort there. There's familiarity there. There's connection there. And the client that I was talking with yesterday, she's got some really strong opinions that are beautiful. She's got a story that's beautiful. It's painful, but beautiful. And if we just leaned into more of the things that we really think, like there are 8 billion people in the world. And like, I promise you that somebody is just waiting for you to say the thing. Like they're thinking it, but they need you to say it first. They're just waiting for you to go first.
Yeah.
And so I think like where things become a lot easier, especially as solopreneurs, people trying to build their businesses online, personal brand, right? We're going to lean through that lens. It's just say the things that you actually think, because again, it may not be for everybody, but that thing that you're thinking may be the thing that makes a person be like, can I please pay you? And whatever the capacity is.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I want to be your best friend.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
You're my person. In whatever. And it's not just in a coaching capacity, right? It can be in like the agency, right? Like I talk about social media. When I talk about social media from an agency perspective, I'm like, can you please stop making pretty non-converting content? Like, what are you doing? And then people are like, my whole life is pretty non-converting content. Like, what am I doing wrong? Right. Because I believe that your content's not converting for you. Like, hey, you're probably wasting a whole lot of time on social media. And so like leaning into the things that you actually believe, even if they're going to ruffle some feathers, like, great, do that. Tell your story, be honest about your own experience, right? Like not every one of my businesses has been successful. I've been sued. I've been fired. I've closed businesses. I've had ideas that I started that I thought were going to work and did not work out. I've made the wrong investments. I've hired the wrong coaches. Like I've done the things. I've fallen into the pool of cold water face first. But if I didn't talk about that, like I want to help you to not do those things.
Yeah.
But if I didn't talk about that, that's not relatable. It's also just not my authentic truth. Like even talking about the fact that, there was a huge strain in my marriage in the first year of, a lot of people be like, wow, like it's really open. Like, that's just the truth. I'm not going to sit here and be like, my marriage is also perfect. It's not. Like nobody's is. And so I think there's a huge relatability and human piece that matters.
Sure. They say like in, script writing, if you want to make a character unlikable, make them perfect.
Yeah.
So it's the same with us, if, and that's the point. It's not about the money. It's about the connection.
Exactly.
There's enough content. I saw this quote. I love it. And I try to think of it often. We have enough content. What we need is connection. And
yes,
and that's what you're doing by being authentic and sharing your story. And we could talk forever, but I want to be respectful of your time. I mean, how has all of this changed you as a mom and, impacted your life? Because so many people will often not choose to go down the entrepreneurial journey because they don't understand the impact that it could have in their life. And it's so full of fear. So I love to share that.
Yeah, I think for me, like I get to do drop up and pick up most days. I mean, today I didn't, my husband did because I had a call, but most of the time, like I get to be there, like my kids have, my kids got soccer. One of my kids plays flag football. We get to go. I'm there every week, like I get to be there for my kids. And, I had that with my mom because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My father worked and he was I think I was a swimmer growing up. I have memory of him being at like one swim meet because he was working, right? It was always, he was never around. And for me, I want to have the ability to be there for my kids. I want to be able to like pull my kids out of school and go on an adventure on a random Thursday and not have to ask for anybody's permission. Like those are the things that matter. Or like my kids are sick and it's like, hey, cool, I may have to move some client calls around. All of my clients know that, hey, I'm a mom and while I love them and I'm here for them, if my kids need something, I'm going to reschedule, and that's okay. Right. And so for me, it's really created this freedom. It's allowed me to show up for my kids in the ways that I want to. It's allowed me to create adventure for them without having to be like, oh, do I have any more vacation days left? Or do I need to, fake sick today so that we can go on an adventure? It's just, for me, it's that freedom to mother in the way that I want to. And also on the days that I want to outsource and make sure they're at school for the day so that I can take care of myself and, go to the spa for a day, then I will do that too. And so for me, it's really, the reason that entrepreneurship is a place that I'm going to stay is freedom. Freedom is one of my core values, and not just freedom, like financial freedom, but freedom of time, freedom of place, but also freedom of my mind to be able to create what I want when I want. And so for me as a mother, it's really allowed for the space for me to be a devoted mother when I need to be, and to be there for them in ways that are important to me.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. I agree. So if you wanted somebody to stick with one message from this conversation, what would it be?
Oh, we covered a lot of things. We went through a
I
lot of
know
paths.
we did. I mean, you just have such a great wealth of knowledge and just
Thank you.
Authenticity. I don't know if I had to say one
Yeah.
word, you're just authentic and you can just feel it. So I love it.
Yeah, I think, the thing that I would want somebody to take away is like your magic is needed. And if you're in a place in your business where you're feeling like you don't want to lean into what is it you really think or do things the way that you want to do them, like permission to build your business and life the way that feels really good for you. And like people need your magic, and you have no idea who needs you to be that example, whether it's your kids or somebody else that's watching that you don't even know. And so, yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is like, it's okay for you to build a life that's different than the one that you had growing up or that you have seen around you. And there's so much potential. It just really starts with doing the scary thing.
Yeah, this whole conversation, I was just watching this video last night, and it was a review of a book called The Pathless Life. Okay. And this whole conversation is just like that book. So check out that.
Now I need to read it. I haven't read it. I'm going to check it out.
It's really interesting. Like it talks about, getting in the prestige trap, with your job, and then doing, a job of expectation. And, somebody who was a former doctor read this book and decided to quit his job and, become an entrepreneur. And, so I found that story really fascinating, but I love it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Where can listeners connect with you? And definitely listen to This Mother Means Business. I love the podcast. So
yeah, I would be honored if anyone listens to This Mother Means Business. Like I said, I blush literally every time someone says, I listen to your podcast and I love it. I'm like, oh gosh. But if you made it this far in the episode, we are definitely friends now. So please make sure you send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at It's Laura Sinclair. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm at Laura Connor -Sinclair. Because I built my corporate career under Connor, my maiden name. Laura-Sinclair.com is my website, but please don't hesitate to reach out. Instagram is where I spend most of my time. And I'd love for you to let me know that you listen to the podcast and just say hi so that we can be friends.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, Laura, so much for being on the podcast.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you again to Laura Sinclair for being on the podcast. There will be links on how you can connect with Laura in the show notes. Be sure to check out her podcast, This Mother Means Business. I am so grateful for her insights and everything that she shared with us, and being an example of just owning it, and where we all should strive to be, to just show up authentically and be ourselves and share the gifts that we were born to share. And so I think Laura is such a great example of that. So let us know if you agree. If this podcast episode impacted you, please let us know. Post on Instagram, tag Laura and I. We'd love to hear about it. You can reach out to Laura. I'll have her contact information in the show notes. And then you can also reach out to me at mombusinesscoach.com. I'd love to hear from you. Do not be shy. I hear so many people who say, I was going to say something but didn't. But please reach out. I mean, we're here to support you. We're all applauding for you. And that's why this podcast even exists. So I'm so grateful to have you as a listener. And again, if you could leave us a review, it would mean so much to me. It helps other mompreneurs find the show. And then two, Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and then share the episode with anybody that you think might love the episode too. I would appreciate it. So thank you so much. I cannot wait to share my next conversation with you. I want to pinch myself. I get to have these amazing conversations with amazing guests, and I hope it's impacting you as much as it impacts me. I'm so grateful. So with that, we are absolutely here supporting you and applauding you. And, if there is anything we can do to support you, if there is an episode that you want to hear, if you have a content idea or somebody you'd love me to interview, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. So I hope you have an amazing week. I can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you so much again for listening. And we're here just applauding you. So thank you so much. Have a great one. Bye.